Že stehno má väčší ako on.
Neviem, čo si zahrám.
Daj si lígo. Môžem sa budeš odčívať, dojde matka. To bolo super.
Pozaj, hen to hráš cez Steam, to Defiance, či čo to je?
Nie, to je cez Glyph.
Cez čo?
Glyph. Glyph toho.
Prečo nie cez Steam, že aj
To
na
je jedno, to
Steam
keď
to
spustíš cez Steam, to ti aj tak spustí Glyph.
Ja, no tak...
To neobídeš, jasne.
Ale máš to v knižnici, ako
Mám,
na Steam,
jasne,
hej?
jasne. Mám. A nemyslím, že sa to dá obísť. Myslím, že vždy ťa pustí Glyph.
Skirmish?
Ale 7. júna stejno začína nová liga v Power of Exile, 7. júna, predtým ako pojem do vojny sa ešte nápašte. Káľ sa už nevie dočkať Power of Exile, povedal si to ešte zmocne. Si tu?
No.
Šmáker. Čmelo, spíš? Čmelo. Čmelo, ty nesedíš, ty ležíš, ty si ma oklamal. Čmelo, posaď sa. Čmelo. Čmelo. Kurník šapko. Čmelo, veľa seriálov si nevidel. To bieda.
To bieda má Clegane.
Keď si predstavím ešte jedného mutanta.
Čo? Ty náhodou, ja sa neviem sústrediť na bovanie aj na hranie zároveň.
Čmelo, vstávaj, posaď sa. Čmelo.
Čo znamená skirmish?
Skrie mi, že niečo ako jedna rýchla runda, niečo ako runda bez pravidiel, proste runda. Žiadny príbeh, žiadne šmáky, proste nejaká runda. Skirmish. Proste dá si len šmák do tela. Čmelo, neobsa, že spíš. Všetci vieme, že nespíš, Čmelo, lebo nepočujeme zvuky.
Idem asi zahrať Stronghold na pol hodinu a pôjdem asi do postele, ale pustím si asi stream.
Čmelo, zobuď Čmela. Všetci vieme, že nespí, lebo je ticho.
Tak človek hneď nechrape, hneď ako zaspí, vieš.
No ale Čmelo nie je človek.
No dobre, idem hrať, tak čau.
Choď. Čmelo, ozvi sa. Neskúšaj triky. Ja si nestiahnu ďalší blacklist, ďalší časť blacklistu. Lebo vidím, že Čmel za chvíľu zaspí. Zatiaľ sa iba robí, že spí, ale za chvíľu naozaj zaspí. Jasné. Sa dá nejako obísť. Ja sa vám nechce nič muchať, páni. Neviem, či ja potrebujem je stiahnuť ten blacklist. Jak to spravím? Vymažem jeden blacklist. Si videl nestrana. Ešte tam limitless nedopozerám. Kvantiko nedopozerám tiež. Ani to časť, ale kvantiko je úplne pozadu. To kvantiko by som si mal pozrieť tu. To je kvantika, som videl. Kaž. S07 som videl podľa všetkého. S08 nie. S7 vyzerá byť pozretá. Do Delpika 6, nájdem si pustiť Steam. Pozriem si Steam. Či náhodou nejako nepošmakovali na tom. Není mi už nejako teplo. Tak sa ho zvymilo, ako keby. Že je čas dať si tohto šmáka. Outward, to som skúšal Outward. To je šmák. Čo by ste jedno. Strong Gold Crusader 2. Šmák čmela. Čmela po srdce. Elder Scrolls Online LZ. Čo to je? View page. Nový datadisk. Díval sa to Elder Scrolls. Pekne dáme šmáky. Daj šmáky. Daj šmáky. Ja potom stiahnu blacklist. Kvantiko. Kvantiko som tuším videl si jednu časť. Russian Girl. Sex Education. Čo to za veci? Aj tento, no. New armors and weapons. Nové armory a brnenia. To je dobrá vec, tento update. Ale... Je to ten... Peppermint. 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 sú tí naši šmaci. Tí naši šmaci. Tí naši šmaci. Tí naši šmaci. A toto len tak budem kvásiť, túto pri šmaku. Tí naši šmaci. Tí naši šmaci. Tí naši šmaci, naši gurmíci, naši gurmíci, naši šmaci, naši gurmíci.
Move over Flicker Strike, Brutus Boys are coming through. There will also be a new skill called Berserk that rapidly consumes rage to give you more damage, attack speed and movement speed, and less damage taken. The Berserker Ascendancy will be featuring reworked bonuses that interact with both rage and the Berserk skill. This is only a basic overview of some of the new skills and archetypes coming in Legion, with more details to come over the next few weeks. Now that's what I have for now as far as new reveals go, so I wanted to share some of my initial thoughts. In the shadow of the complexity of some of the recent leagues, a straightforward combat-oriented league mechanic is what a lot of players have been asking for. Legion looks like it'll fit the bill, and modelling it after Breach is a promising idea, of course. Legion could well prove to be a better Breach with the player agency over how much challenge we take on in each encounter. Breach had the issue where you would sometimes get empty breaches, and other times you'd be overwhelmed by a crazy breach full of Tull Frostbladers. Legion's design of giving us control over how many monsters we fight could well be a real winner. Only time will tell how good it feels to actually play, of course, but Legion does win a lot of points with me personally, thanks to its reward structure. Build-changing, unique design and jewels that follow high variance, high impact design of the Watcher's Eye jewels are an exciting thing to chase after, I think. And the idea of getting in the middle of 4 or 5 way battles is quite an exciting premise to me. It's always been one of my favourite things in games when you come across NPCs duking it out. The melee changes look to be exceeding my personal expectations of what we'd be getting as well. I did expect new skills and reworks, maybe with some improvements to animations and such, but things like animation cancelling, instant move skills and targeting changes are a real game changer for the game. I think there is some potential here that some of these changes may introduce new problems that we have to deal with, like players accidentally cancelling attacks when they didn't mean to, but this may just require an adjustment period. The potential for these changes greatly increasing the skill ceiling of racing and competitive play is just very exciting to me, especially since the competitive scene has really been ramping up of late. This is just honestly way more than I expected personally when GGG said they'd be doing a simpler league mechanic and expansion, especially since so much of work is happening on 4.0 and ExileCon at the moment. But that's enough from me. I'm curious what you guys think. Does this take on the Breach style get you amped? Is this what you were hoping for with Melee? Please feel free to leave your thoughts and questions in the comments below, and I'll answer what I can and make some follow-up videos if I can as well. I'm looking forward to spending the entire reveal day going...
At the start of Game of Thrones, we meet the Stark family. There's Ned, Catelyn, Robb, and they all die, but we've still got Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon's alive in the books, and there's Jon, who's secretly half Targaryen, at least in the show. We tend to see the Starks as the good guys, but the Stark family aren't the Brady Bunch. In Chapter 1, Ned beheads a guy and makes his sons watch, and the kids all get pets from a giant dead wolf. It's clear from the start that the Starks are connected to harsh ancient customs and mysterious magic. Bran becomes a psychic tree god, Arya a faithless assassin, and Jon an undead prophetic warrior king. The blood of House Stark is tied to the ancient secrets of Winterfell and the Wall, the Night's King and White Walkers, which might hint at the ending of Game of Thrones. According to legend, House Stark began 8,000 years ago, after the Long Night, when the White Walkers came for the first time. The Walkers were defeated by the last hero with the Children of the Forest, or by Azor Ahai with a flaming sword. There are lots of different legends. But the Walkers went away, and Brandon the Builder raised the wall to keep them out. Brandon also built the castle of Winterfell and started House Stark, who ruled as kings of winter for thousands of years. Eventually, a people called the Andals invaded Westeros from across the sea, bringing a new religion and culture. only the kings of winter could resist them, and that's why the North keeps the customs of the first men, worshipping the old gods and remembering things that others forget. It all ties back to the foundation of House Stark in the fight against White Walkers and winter. The ancient words of House Stark are a warning that winter is coming. The castle of Winterfell might be named for the place where the White Walkers were defeated, where winter fell. Winterfell is built on hot springs that keep it warm through winter, and the crown of the Stark Kings was spiked with iron, a metal of winter, to fight against the cold. In the Winterfell crypts, the statues of dead Starks have swords of iron, and it's said that White Walkers hate iron. Winterfell might have magic defenses against White Walkers, because the Wall and Storm's End have protective spells, and Brandon the Builder is supposed to have built them both. Maybe he gave Winterfell protective spells as well. It's said there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, as though the Starks have an ancient responsibility to defend the North from winter and White Walkers. But the story goes deeper than that. Along the Wall are 19 castles, mostly abandoned now. The oldest is the Nightfort, a dark and sinister place that's connected to the White Walkers. There are stories of a thing that came in the night that killed people, then brought them back as shambling slaves, like whites. There's a tale of a knight with eyes like blue stars, like a White Walker. And the oldest Nightfort legend tells of the Night's King. In the TV show, the leader of the White Walkers is called the Night King, but he seems to be a different character to this Night's King. Because the Night's King was Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and he met a woman with skin cold as ice and eyes like blue stars, which sounds like she was a White Walker. The Night's King made her his queen and gave her his seed and his soul. Together they ruled the Nightfort and made sacrifices to the White Walkers, which might mean that they gave their children to the Walkers, like how the wildling Craster sacrifices his children. The Night's King and Queen ruled for 13 years, until they were cast down by the Stark King, Brandon the Breaker. All records of the Night's King were destroyed, and his name was forbidden, wiped from the memory of man. Why was the name of the Night's King so important? Well, Old Nan says that the Night's King was the brother of Brandon the Breaker, that the Night's King was a Stark. So, did an ancient Stark marry a White Walker? We can't totally trust these old legends. No one really knows what happened thousands of years ago. But the stories are there to give us hints, and there was obviously some kind of White Walker action at the Nightfort, which might have been part of the plan from the beginning. Because in Book 3, we see the Black Gate, a secret hidden magic gate at the Nightfort that lets watchmen through the wall. It's made of a living weirwood face at the bottom of a deep, dark well. It's super creepy and looks like just the sort of gate you'd use if you were secretly giving babies to White Walkers. And the thing is, the Black Gate is as old as the wall itself. It was built into the Nightfort from the start. Was this place designed for sacrifice to the White Walkers? The Nightfort was the chief seat of the Night's Watch for thousands of years. It was the first castle on the Wall, possibly built by Brandon the Builder, founder of House Stark. So why do its oldest legends point to sacrifice and marriage to White Walkers? One popular theory is that the Walkers weren't just defeated in the Long Night, but there was actually a peace agreement. We know that lots of wars in the North ended with the Starks marrying a daughter of their enemy. So maybe the Long Night ended with the Stark Night's King marrying a White Walker. We know that Craster makes peace with the Walkers by sacrificing his children, so maybe sacrifice at the Nightfort was part of this White Walker peace deal. We also know that humans once made a pact with the children of the forest, and this was done before a grove of weirwood trees. Maybe the Weirwood Black Gate represents a similar pact between the White Walkers and the Starks. Maybe a marriage alliance with the White Walkers is how the Starks became kings of winter and built the icy wall. Maybe the phrase, "there must always be a Stark in Winterfell," was part of this ancient agreement. This is just speculation. If there ever was a peace with the Walkers, it's now forgotten. but the Starks might still be connected to the Walkers by their blood. There's a theory that the Starks are descended from the Night's King and his icy Night's Queen. Game of Thrones is full of symbolic repetitions and parallels. It's like poetry, it rhymes. And one of the stories that's repeated is of a baby boy with a secret special bloodline being raised as a Stark at Winterfell. For example, Jon Snow is secretly the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, but Jon is raised as Ned Stark's son at Winterfell. Another example is the story of Bael the Bard, where the son of a wildling was raised as a Stark at Winterfell. And there's a similar story with Gilly's baby. Remember that Gilly is one of the wives of Craster, who gives his sons to the White Walkers. When Gilly gives birth to a son, she and Sam run south to save the baby, passing through the Black Gate of the Nightfall. The plan is to raise Gilly's baby as Sam's bastard, and Jon considers raising the boy at Winterfell. So, over and over, there's a story of a baby boy with a secret bloodline being raised at Winterfell. Maybe the same thing happened with a child of the Night's King. Like, we're told that Brandon the Breaker cast down his brother, the Night's King. What if Brandon found one of the Night's King's children at the Night Fort? Would Brandon murder his own baby nephew when kinslaying is such a crime in the North? Or would Brandon take his brother's baby to Winterfell and raise him as his own, just like Ned raised Jon and the Starks raised Bael's son? The story of Bael reveals that the Starks have wildling blood. Maybe the story of the Night's King reveals that the Starks have the blood of the Night's Queen, the blood of White Walkers. We are told that the Starks are not like other men, that they're made of ice and made for the cold. Old Stark kings included Brandon Ice Eyes and Edric Snowbeard. They named their sword Ice, just like the White Walkers use swords of ice. Maybe to the ancient kings of winter, the words "winter is coming" was a boast and a threat. Because the ancient Starks didn't accidentally take over the North. They conquered it, kingdom by kingdom, slaughtering men, stealing wives, wiping out entire houses. These Starks were bad guys who did terrible things. Maybe in this brutal past, the Starks embraced their White Walker blood, just as the Targaryens embraced their blood of the dragon in their conquests. There's a great symmetry in the Targaryens having fiery dragon blood if the Starks have icy White Walker blood. But being related to ice demons must have gone out of fashion, because now the Starks seem to want to deny their White Walker heritage. Like, that'd be why they hide the Stark name of the Night's King. And these iron swords in the crypts, we're told that they keep the spirits of the dead locked in their tombs. Why do the Starks need to lock away their own ancestors? Maybe because their ancestors are part White Walker. Maybe the Starks started using these iron swords to lock away their icy heritage. Maybe the iron in the crown of the Kings of Winter is there to suppress the White Walker in the mind of each Stark. Maybe Winterfell isn't built just to keep walkers out, it's built to keep White Walkers in. This whole thing could be very Lovecraftian. H.P. Lovecraft was a horror writer who influenced Game of Thrones author George Martin. There are Lovecraft references all over the world of Thrones. Go watch our East video. And one of Lovecraft's recurring ideas is the fear of something terrible in your ancestry. In one story, called The Shadow of the Innsmouth, the narrator finds out that he's descended from evil fish gods called Deep Ones. He tries to resist the Deep Ones, but ends up joining them in the sea. Maybe, similarly, the Starks will discover to their horror that they're descended from White Walkers, but will have no choice but to join them. Remember that Gilly's baby was meant to be sacrificed to the White Walkers, apparently to be transformed into one. So when Gilly and Sam take the baby south instead, the White Walkers come after them to take back the baby that was promised. Maybe that's what's happening with the Starks. Like, if the Starks are all descended from a baby of the Night's King who was meant to be sacrificed, maybe the Walkers are now coming south to take back what's owed, to take the Starks as their own. Jon Snow is set up as the guy to beat the White Walkers, but surely the story won't end with just like a sword fight with the Night King. Author George Martin says that Game of Thrones isn't about good guys fighting bad guys. It's about conflict within the human heart, like love versus duty, survival versus sacrifice. And that's what John's story is all about. He sacrifices his honor, his love, his own life. Maybe now he'll have to sacrifice himself to the White Walkers. He is the prince that was promised, in more ways than one. Maybe he'll represent the Stark blood promised to the White Walkers. John makes peace with the Wildlings. Maybe he'll make peace with the White Walkers. It could be another marriage pact. John could become the new Night's King. There are lines in the books about John having armor made of ice and his skin growing pale and cold. The tragedy here would be that John has just fallen in love with Daenerys, so again he'll have to choose between love and duty, between fire and ice, between banging his aunt and becoming a popsicle king to save the world. It's fantasy and it's human drama and it's bittersweet. This could be the end of Game of Thrones. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. We'll be making lots more videos for the final season of Game of Thrones. For more on the Starks and White Walkers, check out Lucifer Means Lightbringer, Ideas of Ice and Fire, Grey Area, and others. The community's done lots of great analysis on this stuff. Thanks to artists Oriana Weisner, Claradox, Papazi, and Erdaj Aldenos. This video topic was chosen by the patrons at patreon.com/AltShiftX. Thanks to patrons Dr. B, Gyovaidora, Jack Earphone, Travis Laylau, William Applegate, Story Hideo Smith, Majora's Mask, Jordan Bell, Max Campagna, Casper Sedgwick, Sam Goss, and Solvaland. Cheers.
Tak. Taková je tematika.
Jaqen H'ghar is probably the most confusing Game of Thrones character. Like, first he's in a cage, then he's a soldier, and he kills people for Arya, and gives her a coin, and changes his face, and goes away. Then 3 seasons later, in Braavos, there's this old guy who's actually Jaqen, but he says he's not Jaqen, then he dies, then he's still alive, then he's like, you are now no one. In the books, things are different again. Jaqen isn't at the House of Black and White in Braavos, but he does turn up at the Citadel at Old Town, disguised as an alchemist. And there are all these theories, all these connections Jaqen and the Faceless Men have with Euron Greyjoy, dragons, and Valyria. Some people even think that Jaqen may be Syrio Forel. So let's work this stuff out. What's going on with Jaqen H'ghar? In Book and Season 2, Arya joins a group of Night's Watch recruits led by Yoram. Most of them are prisoners from the dungeons of King's Landing, and 3 of these are considered so dangerous that they're kept chained up in the back of a wagon. There's Biter, a monstrous man with pointed teeth, Rorge, a brute with no nose, and then there's Jaqen H'ghar, a handsome, smiling, polite man who says he's from the city of Lorath. Jaqen is nice to Arya, asks her for beer, tells her she could make a friend. Later, when the group is attacked, Jaqen, Rorge, and Biter's wagon catches fire, and Arya saves them from the flames by bringing an axe to break their chains. When Arya is taken to Harrenhal, Jaqen turns up again, apparently having joined under the Lannisters as a mercenary. Jaqen tells Arya that since she saved him and Rorge and Biter from the fire, the Red God is owed 3 lives, so Jaqen offers to kill 3 people for her. Once this death debt is paid, Jaqen says his time is done. He magically changes his face into another man's, taking on a whole new identity. The name Jaqen, the face, the manner of speech, the whole personality is revealed to be a lie. The truth is that this person is an assassin of the Faceless Men. The Faceless Men are a secretive society of assassins. You pay them and they'll kill someone for you. They're said to be very expensive, but very effective. When Arya joins the Faceless Men at their base in the House of Black and White in Braavos, we learn that the Faceless Men aren't just assassins, they're also priests who worship death. They believe that every different religion has some figure that represents death, so they call death the many-faced god. When Jaqen was talking about the Red God before, he was talking about the Lord of Light as a face of the many-faced god, one of many aspects of death. The Faceless often speak of death as a gift, a mercy, a release from the suffering of life, so the assassinations they carry out seem sacred to them. As assassins, Faceless Men are trained to use deception, perception, poison, and sticks to kill their targets. They use human faces to magically disguise themselves as other people. and they're trained to give up their identities, their hopes and dreams, loves and hates, everything that makes them who they are. To become a faceless man, you must become no one. Which makes things very confusing. It means that when we talk about Jaqen H'ghar, we're actually talking about a faceless man who happens to wear Jaqen's face, but apparently any faceless man can wear any face. There's this stuff in the show where a man who appears to be Jaqen drinks poison and dies, and then the waif wears Jaqen's face, and then another man turns up as Jaqen later. So the faceless men seem interchangeable, almost like a hive mind. Any of them can be anyone because they're all no one, so it's probably best to think of Jaqen as just an extension of the faceless men, a servant of the many-faced god. But what's he actually up to? Jaqen makes a big effort to recruit Arya to the faceless men. He turns up just when she's feeling weak and afraid and shows her that killing can make her feel strong and brave. By letting her pick 3 of her enemies to kill, Jaqen gives her a taste of the power of being a faceless assassin. Never mind that a real faceless assassin doesn't get to pick their own targets. He shows off by changing his face in front of her, and that's when he tells her to come with him to Bravos to learn the same magic, as though the House of Black and White was more Hogwarts than Death Cult. He fails to mention all the downsides of being with the faceless, like living in a stone temple, scrubbing corpses, daily beatings, and, completely giving up your identity to become no one. Jaqen's like some slimy army recruiter. He manipulates Arya into joining the faceless men, and some fans believe this was his mission all along. Maybe that the manipulation begins with Syrio Forel. Syrio Forel is the Braavosi swordsman who trains Arya in King's Landing, and he teaches her many of the same things that Jaqen and the Faceless Men teach. How to be sneaky, how to stand very still, to see things as they truly are, and that violence can make her feel strong. Syrio's training is like the perfect introduction to a later training with the Faceless Men, like How to be Badass 101 before the more advanced badassery at the House of Black and White. In the show, Syrio tells Arya there is only one god, and his name is Death, which lines up with what Jaqen says later. There is only one god, a girl knows his name. So the theory here is that the reason for these connections and similarities between Syrio and Jaqen is that Syrio is Jaqen, another false face of the Faceless Men who came to King's Landing specifically to train Arya and recruit her as a faceless assassin. Which could maybe be possible. The last time we saw Syrio, it looks like he's about to be killed by Meryn Trant, but maybe he actually escapes and somehow ends up in the Black Cells with the face of Jaqen H'ghar in time to be recruited to the Night's Watch in the same group with Arya. But why would Syrio/Jaqen deliberately get himself locked up in the Black Cells and in that cage that almost got him killed? Surely he could have found another way to stick with Arya if that was his goal. And if it wasn't deliberate and he got locked up by mistake, it's a pretty big coincidence that he just happened to be recruited into the same group Arya was traveling with. So either way, this doesn't make much sense. And what about Syrio himself? Like, did the Faceless Men seriously kill and replace the first sword of Bravos just so they could train a random Westerosi 9-year-old? Is Arya really such an amazing potential assassin to be worth all this hassle? And how would the Faceless Men even know about her? Do they have spies at Winterfell? The more you think about it, the less sense it makes for Syrio to be Jaqen. The more likely explanation is that the reason why Syrio's training fits with Jaqen's is because this is a story. It needs to fit, it needs to have a flow to it. Arya's arc explores themes of violence and loss of identity, so naturally she meets mentors who gradually guide her down that path. Not every character has a secret identity, but some of them do. The Alchemist is a mysterious character we see in Feast at Old Town. He makes a deal with a guy named Pate, a novice at the Citadel where maesters are trained. The Alchemist gives Pate a gold piece in return for a certain key, a key said to be able to unlock every door in the Citadel. We're told almost nothing about the Alchemist, but we do get a description of his face. A description that happens to perfectly match the new face that Jaqen wears after he leaves Harrenhal. Full cheeks, a hooked nose, a scar on the right cheek, and curly black hair. The Alchemist is another false identity of the Faceless Men, probably the same man as Jaqen. So, in Feast, this Alchemist gets his key and then he appears to kill Pate, but later, when Sam arrives in Old Town, he meets Pate alive and well, but there are some weird things about him. The clues suggest that this Pate is actually the alchemist in disguise, who is probably actually Jaqen in disguise, who is actually a faceless man in disguise. And now this babushka assassin is bunking with Sam Tarly in Old Town, holding a key said to be able to unlock every door in the Citadel. But why? What do the faceless men want in the Citadel? We're given one clue. In Dance, Tyrion mentions a book, a fragmentary, anonymous, blood-soaked tome called Blood and Fire, or The Death of Dragons, the only surviving copy of which is supposedly hidden away in a locked vault beneath the Citadel. When Pate gives the alchemist the key, he specifically wonders if the alchemist might want a book locked down in the vaults of the Citadel. So the clues suggest that the faceless man wants this book. But why are the faceless men interested in dragons? In Feast, the kindly man tells Arya how the faceless men began. His story goes back thousands of years to the Valyrian Freehold, the empire of the original Dragon Lords, who ruled most of the known world through the power of their dragons and their slaves. The kindly man tells of the slaves who worked in the mines beneath volcanic mountains called the 14 Flames. These mines were so hot and the work so hard that slaves would pray for an end to their pain. And the first faceless man was someone who gave them that gift, who killed the slaves who suffered the most. Arya says they should have killed the slave masters, not the slaves, and the kindly man says he would bring the gift to them as well. But that is a tale for another day. So the kindly man is suggesting that the faceless men brought the gift of death to the slave masters of Valyria. And some readers believe this refers to the doom of Valyria, the massive fiery catastrophe that suddenly destroyed the Empire 400 years ago. The doom is mysterious. No one really knows what caused it, but maybe the faceless men were behind it, killing all the slave masters, their slaves, and the entire empire in one huge terrible sacrament to the many-faced god of death. There's no strong evidence for this, but it totally could fit, and it could maybe explain why the faceless men now want this book about dragons, because of course there were survivors of the Doom. The Targaryen family and their dragons escaped Valyria and went on to conquer Westeros, ruling the Seven Kingdoms for centuries until their overthrow by Robert, eventually leaving Daenerys the last of the Dragon Lords. And now she's rising as a queen, conquering cities across Slaver's Bay, and unlike the Targaryens of the last 100 or so years, Dany has dragons. Given their history with Valyria, the faceless men are probably not too keen for a new dragon queen with the blood of old Valyria. So maybe they want to stop her, maybe they want to kill her dragons, and maybe that's why Jaqen is stealing a book called The Death of Dragons. There are a lot of maybes here, and there are problems with the idea. For one thing, Dany is ending slavery in the cities that she captures, and it seems like slavery is kind of the main problem that the Faceless Men had with Valyria. Also, if the Faceless Men are so against Valyrians and Targaryens, you'd think they would have moved against them sometime in the last 300 years of Targaryen rule in Westeros. Maybe they did somehow. At this point, we just don't know, but this history with Valyria seems important either way. Another big thing is that in Book 3 we hear that Balon Greyjoy, father of Theon and Asher, has died, fallen from a bridge at Pike during a storm. In the show, we see Balon's brother Euron is the one to kill him, attacking him and pushing him off the bridge, but in the books it's different. In a sample chapter of Winds, Euron admits to killing Balon, but says he didn't do the deed himself, so who did? Well, earlier in Book 3, the ghost of Highheart has a dream of a man without a face, waiting on a bridge that sways and swings. On his shoulder perches a drowned crow, with seaweed hanging from his wings. The drowned crow sounds like Euron Crowseye, and the man without a face sounds like a faceless man. So it sounds like Euron hired a faceless man to kill Balon. Maybe Jaqen was the one to do it after he went to Harrenhal. But there's another complication because remember, the faceless men are expensive, and George Martin says that the cost of hiring a faceless assassin depends on how important and hard to kill the target is. So if Euron hired a faceless man to kill King Balon Greyjoy, it must have cost a lot, so what could he have paid them with? Well, in Feast, Euron says that he once had a dragon egg, but he couldn't make it hatch, so he threw it into the sea. If Euron did have a dragon egg, would he really be stupid enough to throw away something so valuable? Maybe he actually used it as payment for a faceless assassin to kill Balon. And maybe the Faceless have plans for this egg. Because dragon eggs seem to be powerful, magical, fiery objects. They were involved in the mysterious tragedy of Summerhall, where a fire got out of control and killed a bunch of Targaryens 40 years ago. Fans speculate that dragon eggs may have been involved in other fiery catastrophes like the destruction of Hardhome and maybe the doom of Valyria. We don't know how this would work exactly, and there's no strong evidence, but the point is that there definitely are connections between the Faceless Men and Valyria and dragons and Euron, especially when you look at the most recent sample chapter of Winds, called The Forsaken. In this chapter, which was a reading by George Martin transcribed by fans, we learn that Euron Greyjoy is even more evil than he seemed. In the books he always was creepy and cruel and manipulative, but in this chapter we see an even darker side to the Crow's Eye. Euron has imprisoned his brother Aeron, along with a bunch of other priests from different religions on his ship, and he's torturing them physically and psychologically, in horrifically creative ways involving fire and dismemberment and talk of past childhood abuse. And Euron drugs Aeron, and he has these nightmares of dragons and krakens and skulls and dead gods, and we learn Euron's planning something, some kind of sacrifice. He's using the blood of priests and warlocks and pregnant women on the eve of a naval battle to cause something terrible. There's imagery of a boiling bloody sea, of a monstrous Cthulhu-like Euron. We're told that blood is power, and that these are the last days, when the world shall be broken and remade. A new god shall be born from the graves and charnel pits. So this is vague, but terrifying, and it could possibly connect to the Faceless Men, who are, after all, a literal death cult. Killing and blood is kind of their jam, and there are some real connections here, like the use of priests from all different religions, is kind of like the many-faced god. And also, all this is happening just off the coast near Old Town, which is where the Faceless Alchemist is. We already know the Faceless Men worked for Euron to kill Balon, so maybe they're also conspiring with him to create this great sacrifice, this terrible orgy of death and blood, which may, like the doom of Valyria, have cataclysmic consequences. There could be dragon eggs involved, the death of dragons may be related, or maybe the Faceless Men have nothing to do with it. We can't say for sure, but here's what we do know. Jaqen H'ghar is the false identity of a Faceless Man. He somehow ended up in the black cells of King's Landing and then met Arya and led her to join the Faceless Men. It's possible that he was working with Arya all along as Syrio Forel, but that doesn't seem likely. We do know that the alchemist, now Pate, is a Faceless Man, probably the same one as Jaqen, and he seems to be planning to steal a book about dragons from the Citadel. We know the Faceless Men have bad blood with Valyria, which might explain their interest in the book The Death of Dragons, and it seems likely that a Faceless Man killed Balon Greyjoy for Euron, which may have involved a dragon egg that may relate back to cataclysms like the Doom. Lastly, we know that Euron's planning some terrible sacrifice, which could also somehow relate to Jaqen, the Faceless Men, and their many-faced god. So that probably raised more questions than it answered, but that's kind of the fun of this character. Comment below what you think Jaqen H'ghar and the Faceless Men are up to, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. This video draws a lot from the ideas of the Song of Ice and Fire fan community, so there are links in the description to some really great essays and forum posts if you'd like to have a look. One of the most mysterious characters in A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones is Varys, the Master of Whisperers, or Spy Master at King's Landing, also called the Spider for his vast web of informers. Varys is a schemer and a manipulator, a master of disguise and illusion, and a keeper of secrets. Whenever anything important happens at court, he's there, watching, whispering, spinning his secret webs. What's this guy up to? Who is he really? And what does he want? Let's start at the beginning. Varys was born not in Westeros, but in a city called Lys, as an orphan boy and apparently a slave. He tells us that he grew up with a troupe of mummers. Mummers are actors or performers, but one day in Myr he was sold to a sort of a sorcerer who cut off Varys's cock and balls and burned them in a magic ritual. Varys was left for dead on the streets, but he managed to survive and become a great thief. When he was driven from Myr, he went to Pentos and formed a criminal partnership with the young Illyrio Mopautus. Varys trained children to work for him as thieves, like a sort of a Fagin without balls, and came to learn that secrets are worth more than silver or sapphires. So Varys' thieves stole information, which eventually made Varys and Illyrio rich and powerful. Meanwhile, in Westeros, King Aerys Targaryen was going mad, convinced that everyone around him was plotting against him. So when Aerys heard about Varys' talents, he brought him to King's Landing to serve as his spy master. In the following years, Varys crouched at the king's side, whispering in his ear like Grimmer Wormtongue, feeding Aerys' paranoia, which probably contributed to Aerys' madness and ultimate downfall in Robert's rebellion. It doesn't seem that Varys intended this, though, because he apparently tried to stop Aerys from opening his gates to the sack of King's Landing. But anyway, Varys continued in his role as the Master of Whisperers under the new king, Robert Baratheon. He learned all the secret passageways around the Red Keep. He built up his network of spies, mostly mute children who he calls little birds, and he solidified his power by making people need him, convincing people that he's on their side, making sure he's too useful and knows too much to be gotten rid of. And eventually the series begins. Varys' actions, as seen through the eyes of Eddard and Tyrion and others, are confusing. In Book 1, Varys warns Ned that the Lannisters want to kill Robert. He reports on Daenerys Targaryen to the small council using Jorah as his spy, though we later find out that Varys actually protects Dany. Varys suggests the dismissal of Barristan Selmy from the Kingsguard, and he tries to save Eddard from execution. In Clash, Varys is helpful and almost friendly with Tyrion, helping him run the city and protect his relationship with Shae, but in Storm he testifies against Tyrion in his trial. But then he helps save Tyrion from execution and leads him to kill Tywin before sending him off to Pentos. Then Varys disappears from King's Landing, leaving a coin in the dungeons that makes Cersei mistrust the Tyrells, and he's gone for all of Feast. But at the end of Dance, he turns up out of nowhere and murders Pycelle and Kevan Lannister. What's he trying to achieve with all this? What's the goal here? It's really hard to see Varys' motivations because he does everything indirectly and secretly and subtly, but it is possible to piece together his grand plan. Back in the very first book, we see that Varys is conspiring with his old friend Illyrio Mopautus, who arranges the marriage between Daenerys Targaryen and Khal Drogo. We're told that the plan at this point is to use Drogo's Dothraki army to invade Westeros and crown Dany's brother Viserys as king. But Viserys dies, then Drogo dies, and Daenerys ends up the Queen of Meereen, so in the show the plan now seems to be to help Daenerys take over Westeros. But in the books it's more complex. There's this boy called Young Griff, who Varys and Illyrio claim is actually Aegon Targaryen, the son of Prince Rhaegar and nephew of Daenerys, widely believed to have been killed as an infant during Robert's rebellion. Varys and Illyrio say they secretly rescued Aegon from the war, and have been raising him ever since to be a perfect king for Westeros. Which raises the question of what they were planning to do with Viserys. Viserys and Aegon can't both be king. One likely explanation is that Varys and Illyrio lied and never actually intended for Viserys to be king. And why would they? He's crazy and cruel and would obviously make a bad ruler. Aegon, on the other hand, seems a pretty decent kid and has a better claim to the throne and has been shaped for rule since before he could walk by Illyrio and Varys' people. They clearly want Aegon, not Viserys, on the throne. So why do they try to give Viserys a Dothraki army? Why tell him to invade Westeros? The plan seems to have been to use Viserys' Dothraki invasion of Westeros as a way of destabilizing and distracting Westeros, making it easier for Aegon to turn up later and take over. Compared to crazy Viserys and his savage foreign army, Aegon would look like the good guy, a savior come from across the sea to bind up the wounds of bleeding Westeros. Of course, after Viserys dies, the plan changes. For a while, they try to get Aegon and Daenerys together to marry them and join their forces and invade Westeros together, but that doesn't work out, and Aegon ends up invading Westeros without her, landing in the Stormlands with an army called the Golden Company in Dance. So the plan has changed a lot throughout the series, but the overall goal seems to have remained the same, to make Aegon Targaryen the King of Westeros. This really helps to understand Varys' actions throughout the series. Early on, he's trying to delay any conflict in Westeros until Viserys is ready to invade, so he tries to protect Robert and Ned from the Lannisters, and he maintains an appearance of loyalty by informing on Daenerys, while on the down low he's supporting her, not only by protecting her from assassination, but by sending useful people to her, like Sir Barry and later Tyrion. By the end of Storm, Varys changes his strategy, trying to destabilize and weaken the Lannister regime in preparation for Aegon's invasion. So he leads Tyrion to kill Tywin, he drives apart Cersei and the Tyrells, and he kills Kevan Lannister, the last person at this point who's really holding the realm together. All throughout the series, Varys is working to pave the way for Aegon's invasion. But why? Varys endlessly says that he serves the realm, that he's a loyal servant of the realm, and the realm needs peace. If that's true, why does he create conflict and chaos and try to start a war to install Aegon as king? If Varys wants a good Targaryen king, he should have just supported Prince Rhaegar all those years ago. Rhaegar sounds like he would have been a great ruler, and since he was Aerys's rightful heir, there would have been no war required to make him king. But Varys actively worked against Rhaegar by warning the Mad King against him, possibly even urging Aerys to disinherit him so that crazy kid Viserys would have taken the throne instead. If Varys really wants a good king in a peaceful realm, why did he undermine Rhaegar? And later, under King Robert, the realm enters a period of peace and prosperity. The World of Ice and Fire calls it a golden... era. Admittedly, there is that massive debt, probably because of Littlefinger, but still, the realm's doing pretty well. So why does Varys spend this time plotting to ruin the peace, start a war, and install a new king? After Robert dies, things do get bad in the War of the Five Kings, which again is mostly Littlefinger's fault, but the war does end and the realm starts getting back into pretty good shape under Tommen. Varys says himself that Kevan Lannister does a good job of starting to make peace and unite the Seven Kingdoms under Tommen's rule. But instead of supporting what could have become a peaceful, stable regime, Varys again undermines the peace by killing Kevan, creating conflict and continuing the plot of Aegon's invasion. That's 3 potentially peaceful and prosperous regimes that Varys has actively undermined. If Varys really just wants a peaceful realm, why does he keep doing this? What possible reason could he have to support this kid Aegon above all others? Varys suggests that Aegon would be a great king. He says he's been trained, educated, instilled with good values, shaped for rule since before he could walk. But isn't it extremely naive to believe that training can guarantee that someone will be a great king? Aegon's just a teenager with little experience of the real world. He's barely even been to the realm he intends to rule. Even if Aegon does turn out to be a great king, what's stopping his heir or successor from being just as bad as Mad Aerys? Within just a generation, Varys' grand plan could easily leave Westeros in a worse position than it was in the first place. And that's if the plan even works. If Aegon is defeated, thousands would lose their lives for nothing. And the original plan, sending Viserys in first, is even more risky. Losing thousands of Dothraki savages on Westeros would be terribly destructive and cause lots of long-term problems. And what if Viserys actually succeeded in taking over Westeros? He could do all sorts of damage, and it's not like he'd happily hand over the crown when Aegon showed up. Varys' supposed plan for peace involves an awful lot of war and destruction and risk, and he's actively sabotaged several other much safer opportunities for a peaceful realm to pursue it. It seems obvious that Varys and Illyrio's true goal isn't just a peaceful realm, but a realm ruled by Aegon. But why? Why does a eunuch from Myr and a merchant from Pentos, men with no apparent connections to Westeros or the Targaryens, work so hard to put Aegon Targaryen on the Iron Throne? Tyrion asks this of Illyrio in Dance, and Illyrio says he hopes to make money out of it, but Tyrion thinks he's a liar, that there's something in this venture worth more to him than coin or castles. And Illyrio admits that even fat old fools like him have friends and debts of affection to repay. Who are these friends? What are these debts of affection? Could they explain the real reasons why Varys and Illyrio want Aegon on the throne? The answers may lie in a theory called the Blackfire Theory. To cover some history real quick, about 120 years ago, the king of Westeros was Aegon IV Targaryen, called the Unworthy because he was one of the worst kings the realm had ever had. He was corrupt and cruel, full of greed and lust. He fathered dozens of bastards, including Brynden Rivers, or Bloodraven, now known as the Three-Eyed Crow, and Shiera Seastar, who may be related to Quaithe, and Aegor Rivers, called Bittersteel, and Daemon Rivers, who took the name Blackfire and a black dragon as his heraldry. On King Aegon's deathbed, he legitimized all his bastards, which put them in line to the throne. Aegon's trueborn son Daeron still should have been the rightful heir, but that was disputed by Daemon, who called himself king and fought a war against Daeron for the throne. Daemon was killed in this first Blackfire rebellion, but Bittersteel, who supported him, fled Westeros, founded a mercenary company called the Golden Company, and swore to put a Blackfire on the Iron Throne. Over the next 50 years, there were 5 more Blackfire rebellions, some led by Bittersteel and his Golden Company, until finally, in the 5th Blackfire rebellion, a young Sir Barristan Selmy killed Maelys the Monstrous, the last Blackfire. Or at least, we're told that Maelys is the last Blackfire, but he was apparently only the last of the male line of House Blackfire, which might imply that the female line is still alive. Many fans believe that Aegon is a descendant of that female line, that he's not really a Targaryen at all, but a Blackfire. And there's strong evidence supporting this idea. We're repeatedly warned in visions and prophecies of a false dragon, or the Mummer's Dragon. A Mummer's Dragon is a cloth dragon on poles used in performances. And of course, Varys is closely linked to Mummers. He was raised by them, taught by them, and constantly uses their skills of acting and illusion. So the idea here is that Aegon is the Mummer's Dragon, the false black dragon, who Varys presents as a Targaryen even though he's actually a Blackfire. Which fits perfectly with Varys' talk of power and belief and perception. He says that
power resides where men believe it resides.
And men believe that power resides in Targaryen blood, no matter if the boy is actually a Blackfire. Another little symbolic hint is a story we're told about a black iron dragon that was used as the sign for an inn until someone broke it and threw it away because it looked like the Blackfire dragon. But many years later, part of it washed up and the black iron had gone red with rust. This alludes to the story of Aegon. The Black Dragon, House Blackfire, was seemingly destroyed years ago, but a survivor has now emerged, disguised as a red dragon, a Targaryen. But probably the strongest evidence for the Blackfire theory concerns the Golden Company, the army that joins Aegon in his invasion of Westeros in Dance. It is super fucking weird for the Golden Company to fight for Aegon Targaryen, because the Golden Company was founded by Bittersteel to fight against the Targaryens for the Blackfires. They fought in the Blackfire rebellions, they were led by Blackfires, they are a brotherhood of exiles united by the dream of Bittersteel. And the dream of Bittersteel was to defeat the Targaryens and put a Blackfire on the Iron Throne. So why would the Golden Company fight for Aegon Targaryen? Tyrion questions Illyrio about this, and Illyrio brushes away the objection as if it were a fly, saying, Blackfire Targaryen, tomato tomato, all the company really wants is to go home to Westeros. Which is like maybe, but that seems to contradict Illyrio's earlier claim that the Golden Company fights for Aegon because of a contract writ in blood, which sounds like it refers to the Golden Company's history with the Blackfires. So there is a lot of uncertainty and secrecy here, but given what we know about the Golden Company, and given all these hints about the Blackfires and the Mummer's Dragon, it seems likely that the Golden Company fights for Aegon Targaryen because they know he's secretly a Blackfire. Some versions of the theory go further, suggesting that Aegon might not only be a Blackfire, but that he might be Illyrio's son. Illyrio clearly has affection for Aegon. He's really sad that he doesn't get to spend time with him. He praises him, gives him little gifts of his favourite food. He even has a chest of children's clothes in his home that may have been Aegon's when he was younger. Maybe Illyrio treats Aegon like this because Aegon is his son. Aegon's Blackfire blood would come from Illyrio's now-dead wife, Sarah, who had pale golden hair streaked by silver, just like a Blackfire, and a name that sounds like a Targaryen or Blackfire name. Sarah may be this Blackfire survivor through the female line, and the mother of Aegon Blackfire with Illyrio. The evidence for this idea isn't very strong, but it would go a long way in explaining why Illyrio wants Aegon to be king. Illyrio deeply loved Sarah. He sacrificed a lot of political power and status to be with her, and after she dies of grayscale, he keeps her petrified stony hands as a keepsake, which is quite creepy, but it's also a clear expression of passionate love. Maybe Sarah wanted for her son Aegon what all her Blackfire ancestors had failed to claim, the Iron Throne of Westeros. It might even have been a promise-me-Ned sort of situation. Maybe as Sarah was slowly dying of grayscale, she got her husband Illyrio to swear to honour her memory by granting her son his perceived birthright, the throne. This also could give Varys a pretty good reason to support Aegon Blackfire. Varys is a close friend to Illyrio and may also have been close with Sarah, so it makes sense that he might want to help support Aegon. Some people even suggest that Varys and Sarah might be related, brother and sister perhaps. After all, they both happen to come from Lys, they both happen to end up with Illyrio in Pentos, and maybe Varys shaves his head to hide the pale blonde hair that he may share with Sarah. There's a hint for this in that another character who shaves his head bald is Egg in Duncan Egg. Egg shaves his head to hide his Valyrian blonde hair, and when Varys is introduced in the first book, he is plump, perfumed, powdered, and as hairless as an egg. Also, having Blackfire blood might explain why Varys was castrated in a magic fire ritual. We know that fire magic in this series sometimes requires king's blood, and if Varys is a descendant of the Targaryens and Blackfires, he has king's blood. Maybe that's why he was bought by the sorcerer in the first place. One more little thing is that we're told that only the blood of the dragon would ever know the secrets of the Red Keep, specifically its secret passageways. And as it happens, Varys knows those secrets very well. So it's possible that Varys is Sarah's Blackfire brother. But even if he's not, even if he's only a close friend of Sarah and Illyrio, those connections could help make Varys and Illyrio's grand plan make a whole lot more sense. Because the story we're told, that Varys serves the realm and just wants peace, doesn't make sense. Varys has actively undermined 3 potentially peaceful regimes. He's taken huge, dangerous risks, orchestrated whole wars, all to crown a teenager who might not actually make a good king. Could this really be the ultimate goal of this master player of the Game of Thrones? All this stuff about debts of affection and the Blackfires and familial connections hint that there might be a deeper layer to Varys as a character. Because all this time, Varys has seemed to be so dispassionate, so cold and calculating. People see him as creepy, almost inhuman, not as a man, but as a sinister, all-seeing spider, and a eunuch besides. Cersei says that the reason why Varys is so dangerous is
because he doesn't have a cock.
Implying that he lacks the passions and desires and weaknesses that motivate other people. And Varys plays this up, saying, oh, no one loves a eunuch, they sing no songs for spiders, and in the show it suggested quite clearly that he has no desire, which leaves him free to work towards higher, rational goals like a peaceful realm. But maybe there's more to Varys than this cold, rational exterior. After all, he grew up with actors, he's a master of disguise, he talks endlessly about the power of illusion, and he says pretty explicitly that his role as a sly, unscrupulous spy is an act. Maybe behind the act, behind the illusions, behind the curtain is a man, just a man with human passions, someone who works out of love for his friends and family. George Martin says the only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself. A cold, rational, scheming spider who manipulates politics and orchestrates wars for purely cold, rational reasons is not the human heart in conflict with itself. A much better story is that of a man who was born alone into the world, who was betrayed at a young age, who was cut and beaten and suffered, and so learned to cherish the family he had. A man who used illusion and deception to play the part of a passionless eunuch who only serves the realm, all the while secretly working over years and years out of love for his family, Illyrio, Sarah, and Aegon. Maybe this could be revealed in a climactic, dramatic scene where Varys' plans come crashing down, perhaps even the scene of Varys' death. Imagine a sudden, tragic, bittersweet realization that this evil, scheming spider who stole and lied and started wars and killed good men, who turned the whole damn realm into his puppet show, did what he did out of love. Either that or he's a merman. Thanks for watching. This video was drawn from the ideas of the Song of Ice and Fire fan community. There are links in the description to relevant essays and posts. The series by Brendan B. Fish on Aegon was especially influential here. Thanks also to all the patrons supporting this channel on Patreon. If you'd like to support this channel, please pledge at patreon.com/oldchieftex. Cheers. It looks like the big threat to Westeros in Game of Thrones Season 7 are the Others, or White Walkers, with their army of the dead, marching on the wall to bring a night that never ends. These guys are a problem, because the Walkers are not only super strong, super angry ice demons, but their swords can shatter steel. They seem immune to normal weapons. There are just 2 known ways to kill a Walker. One is with a blade of dragonglass, go watch that video, and the other way is with a blade of Valyrian steel. We see this in Season 5 and it's also hinted in the books. Valyrian steel is a special kind of metal used to make swords that are sharper, stronger, and lighter than blades of regular steel. The steel was made in Valyria hundreds of years ago, but when Valyria was destroyed in a mysterious doom, the secret of making Valyrian steel was lost. So the Valyrian blades that remain are really valuable. There are a couple of hundred of them in Westeros, but only about 20 are mentioned in the books. Most are the treasured heirlooms of noble houses, handed from generation to generation through the centuries. Lots of these swords have great backstories and histories, and some of them may play a role in the war with the Walkers to come. So let's have a look at the Valyrian blades of Game of Thrones. Probably the most obvious Valyrian sword is Longclaw, the sword used by Jon Snow. Longclaw is a bastard sword, which means it's a bit longer than a normal longsword. It's also pretty fitting given that Jon is a bastard, or he's believed to be a bastard, but that's another story. Longclaw is given to Jon by Jeor Mormont, whose family held the sword for hundreds of years. Jeor originally gave Longclaw to his son Jorah, but Jorah dishonored the family by selling slaves and fleeing Westeros. He leaves the sword behind though, so Jeor gives it to Jon. It would be interesting to see Jorah's reaction if he ever sees Jon with his family's sword. But with its bastard blade and white wolf pommel, Longclaw is very symbolic of Jon's identity. It'll no doubt play a big role in Jon's fight against the White Walkers, and the sword might even tie into the prophecies about a hero called Azor Ahai who's expected to lead the fight against the Walkers with a flaming sword called Lightbringer. That's what Stannis and Melisandre are trying to implement. There are theories suggesting that Jon's sword Longclaw might somehow become the true Lightbringer, to be the fire and the light needed to face the darkness and cold. Another sword that appears in the show is Heartsbane, the Valyrian steel greatsword of House Tarly. Randyll Tarly makes a big deal of how he doesn't want his fat, cowardly son Sam to inherit the fabled blade Heartsbane, which is part of the reason why Randyll forces Sam to join the Night's Watch. Heartsbane has a long history. A few hundred years ago, an outlaw from Dorne called the Vulture King was stopped when men led by a savage Sam Tarly hunted him down, using Heartsbane to slay dozens of Dornishmen. There's a pretty good chance our Sam was named after this historical savage Sam. Now, in the books, Heartsbane is held by Randyll Tarly, who's known as one of the great soldiers of Westeros. But in the show, Sam visits home and takes Heartsbane from Randyll, bringing it with him to the Citadel, the sort of Hogwartsy university of the Maesters, which could play out in some interesting ways. Maybe Sam and the Maesters could study Heartsbane, try to unlock the secrets of Valyrian steel, or maybe find more Valyrian blades. But whatever happens at the Citadel, Randyll will want his sword back. Another important sword is Ice, the Valyrian steel greatsword of House Stark. Ice is really big, apparently too big to use in battle, more of a ceremonial sword. Ned Stark uses it to execute Garrett at the start of Book 1, and near the end of Book 1, Ilyn Payne uses it to execute Ned. So the Lannisters end up with ice, and Tywin Lannister decides to melt ice down and reforge it into two smaller swords. Because while no one knows how to make new Valyrian steel, some skilled smiths can reforge it into new forms. In this case, Tywin hires the armourer Turbo Mott, who happens to be the teacher of Gendry. So some people speculate that Gendry knows a thing or two about Valyrian steel. But yeah, ice is melted down and forged into two smaller swords. Tywin gives one to his son Jaime, and the other to his grandson Joffrey. Joffrey names his sword Widow's Wail, while Jaime does something more meaningful. Jaime names his sword Oathkeeper and gives it to Brienne. Because remember, Jaime swears an oath to Catelyn Stark that in return for being set free, Jaime will return to her Sansa and Arya. So Jaime gives Brienne Oathkeeper to uphold this oath on his behalf, to defend Ned Stark's daughter with Ned Stark's own steel. The sword also represents the respect Jaime has for Brienne. He used to have nothing but contempt for her, but now he gives her a sword fit for a hero. Joffrey, meanwhile, uses his Valyrian sword to slay a book, and then a pie, and then he dies. The sword then presumably goes to Joff's brother Tommen, though in the show, Tommen's dead too, so it's not clear who'll use Widow's Wail next. Widow's Wail is now the only known Valyrian sword in the city of King's Landing, so it surely will come in handy sometime. So those are the major Valyrian swords that appear in the story, but there are also some interesting historical ones. Perhaps the most famous Valyrian blade is Blackfire. Blackfire was the sword of King Aegon Targaryen, the Conqueror who first took over Westeros. Aegon was a great warrior and used Blackfire in the battles that founded the Targaryen dynasty. Each king after Aegon bore his sword, so Blackfire became an important symbol of Targaryen political legitimacy. If you had the sword, you were seen as the rightful king. That's why it was so shocking when King Aegon IV, one of the worst Targaryen kings, gave Blackfire to one of his bastard sons, Daemon. Daemon took Blackfire as his house name and later claimed to be the rightful king, beginning a war for succession called the First Blackfire Rebellion. The great battle of this rebellion was at the Redgrass Field, where Daemon used Blackfire in a duel against Gwaine Corbray, who had his own famous Valyrian blade called Lady Forlorn. It's said they fought for near an hour, and each time Blackfire and Lady Forlorn clashed, you could hear the sound from leagues away, half a song and half a scream. Eventually Daemon won the duel, but then he was killed by arrows from his half-brother, Bloodraven, who, by the way, is the same guy who later becomes a tree god and teaches Bran how to magic. More on him later. So Daemon died on the Redgrass Field, but his Blackfire ancestors continued to rebel against the Targaryens for years. And all of this began partly because Aegon IV gave the Conqueror's sword to his bastard son. The sword represents being the rightful king, but for the last 100 years or so, no one seems to know where the sword is, which could have implications for the schemes of Varys and Illyrio. In the books, Varys and Illyrio have this crazy complex conspiracy to put a kid called Young Griff, who they say is Aegon VI, on the Iron Throne. Go watch that video. But basically, there's evidence that this Aegon kid might actually be a Blackfire, a descendant of Daemon. So it's very interesting that in a reading by George Martin of a draft version of a chapter from Dance, Illyrio mentions a gift for young Griff, and a sword, and things Griff must know. Fans speculate that Illyrio may have Blackfire, the fabled blade of Aegon, and will give it to Griff to grant him political legitimacy as a king. This is very speculative, but it could make a lot of sense. It'd solve the mystery of what happened to Blackfire, and would tie present plots to the past in a really cool way. So yeah, Blackfire is important, and Lady Forlorn is also a thing. After the duel at the Redgrass Field, the sword returned to House Corbray, and 100 years later, Lyn Corbray used it in Robert's Rebellion, killing Prince Lewin Martell of the Kingsguard. Lyn is now involved in the plots in the Vale, working with Littlefinger, but it's not clear if he can be trusted. Lyn's a dangerous man, violent, and possibly a pedophile, depending on how you interpret this line about boys. But yeah, that's what's happening with Lady Forlorn now. Historically, there was also a sword called Lady Forlorn used in the Wars of the Andals in the Vale, but apparently that may have been a different Lady Forlorn. People keep naming swords after famous older swords, which can confuse things, but anyway. Another important Targaryen sword is called Darksister. While Aegon the Conqueror had Blackfire, his sister Queen Visenya had Darksister, a slender blade designed for a female warrior. Visenya used the sword during Aegon's conquest, when she wasn't roasting people with her dragon. Many years later, Darksister went to Daemon Targaryen, the rogue prince, who used the sword during the Dance of the Dragons, the big Targaryen civil war. During a mid-air dragon battle with his nephew Aemond One-Eye, Daemon leapt from his dragon onto Aemon's dragon and drove Darksister through Aemon's one good eye before both men and their dragons fell from the sky and died. This is why we need a Game of Thrones prequel movie, guys. After Daemon, Darksister went to Aemon Targaryen, the famous Dragon Knight, said to be one of the greatest and noblest knights that ever lived. He's also the namesake of Maester Aemon Targaryen. After the Dragon Knight, Darksister went to a man called Brynden Rivers, or Bloodraven. Bloodraven really needs his own video, but basically he was a king's bastard, a spy master, sorcerer, hand of the king. He killed Daemon Blackfire at the Redgrass Field, had a relationship with Shiera Seastar, who might possibly be Quaithe. Then Bloodraven joined the Night's Watch, became Lord Commander, went north, and finally became a tree wizard man, the guy who's known in the show as the Three-Eyed Raven. But the question here is, what happened to the sword Darksister? Did Bloodraven bring it with him to the Night's Watch, like Jeor Mormont did? And if he did, is the sword now in the cave where Bloodraven trains Bran? If so, it seems possible that Bran's friend Mira might take up the sword. It is designed for a woman's hand, after all. In fact, some people think that in the show, she already has Darksister. She does grab a sword from the cave in Season 6. Another possibility is for Darksister to go to Arya. Needle is cool and all, but surely a ninja assassin like Arya should have a storied Valyrian sword like Darksister. And Arya is herself kind of a Dark Sister. This is all wild speculation, but given the history and importance of Darksister, it seems likely that the sword will reappear in the story. Another lost Valyrian sword is Brightroar. House Lannister bought Brightroar for a huge amount of gold before the doom of Valyria, but 100 years later, after Valyria was destroyed, King Tommen Lannister went on an expedition to plunder its ruins. He took Brightroar with him and never returned. House Lannister lost one of its most valuable treasures, which always frustrated Tywin when he led House Lannister. So at one point, Tywin's younger brother Gerion went on a quest to find Brightroar, but he never returned either. Go watch the Gerion video. But in the end, Tywin got his Valyrian sword in the form of ice, which he made into Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail. In the books, by the way, these swords are coloured red. Tywin has the metal sort of dyed to the rippling Lannister crimson colour, because Tywin's all about that house pride, family legacy stuff. Anyway, the next couple of swords are owned by Ironborn. There's Red Rain and Nightfall. Red Rain is a Valyrian sword held by Dunstan Drum, the Lord of Old Wick. He whips it out at the Kingsmoot and recounts how his ancestor, Hilmar Drum the Cunning, famously took Red Rain from some knight, armed only with his wits and a cudgel. And there's a theory that the knight who Drum took Red Rain from might have been from House Rain, a family in the Westerlands who Tywin Lannister wiped out. The Rains have a red lion for their sigil, and their name is Rain, so Red Rain is a fitting name in more ways than one. And the Westerlands have historically been raided by Ironborn, so it makes a lot of sense for the Drums to have taken Red Rain from the Rains. In Book 4, Drum is on raids with Red Rain in the Reach. Nightfall is a Valyrian sword held by the knight Sir Harris Harlaw. Harris supports Asher, or Yara Greyjoy at the Kingsmoot, though Euron later kinda steals him from her by making Harris a lord. The sword Nightfall was historically wielded by the infamous Ironborn raider Dalton Greyjoy, called the Red Kraken for all the blood he shed. It's said Dalton loved three things: the sea, women, and his Valyrian sword Nightfall. It's not clear how Red Rain and Nightfall will tie into the broader story of Thrones, but some speculate that King Euron might take these swords from their owners. In the books, Euron has a set of armor made of Valyrian steel. He might want to complement that with a Valyrian sword or two. And Nightfall is a pretty appropriate name for someone who is low-key trying to cause a Lovecraftian blood magic apocalypse type situation, which he is in the books. We'll have to explain that in another video, but basically, Euron is scary. Another Valyrian blade that's had a big impact on the story is not another sword, but a knife. In Book and Season 1, an assassin tries to kill Bran Stark with a knife of Valyrian steel. Catelyn takes the blade to King's Landing, and Littlefinger tells her the knife is Tyrion's. So Catelyn, thinking the dwarf tried to kill her son, arrests Tyrion, which kicks off the War of the Five Kings. The thing is, the real culprit behind the cat's paw is Joffrey. Littlefinger lied about the knife in a deliberate attempt to cause war. After betraying Ned Stark and profiting off the downfall of his family, Littlefinger carries the Valyrian knife in later books, shamelessly wearing a symbol of his lies and betrayal. Now, in the books, Sansa is in the Vale with Littlefinger and the knife. Some people speculate that Sansa will use the knife to kill him, destroying Littlefinger with the same blade he used to destroy her family. There'd be a great poetry to that, though things will probably go differently in the show. There are a few more Valyrian swords that were used in the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen civil war from 100 years ago. Lamentation is a sword carried by a guy called Willem Royce. He got caught up in the storming of the Dragon Pit when a rioting mob of common folk killed some chained-up dragons. In all the violence and the chaos, Willem Royce and his sword were lost. There was also Bald John Roxton and Ormond Hightower, who bore the swords Orphanmaker and Vigilance. Roxton was killed, and we haven't heard from his family since, but the Hightowers are still around, so they might have vigilance at Old Town, where Euron may be closing in. There are a few more Valyrian blades that are only briefly mentioned in the text. Some soldier from Lys had a Valyrian sword called Truth, the Celtigars of Chloryle are said to have a Valyrian steel axe, and a guy called Cago has a Valyrian steel arak, one of those curvy Dothraki scythe things, which is apparently pretty rare in Valyrian steel. Cago is a captain of the Windblown Mercenaries, so he'll be involved in the story ahead in Slaver's Bay. Finally, there are a bunch of Valyrian daggers among the treasure Euron presents at the Kingsmoot. It's a little weird the way these are just offhandedly mentioned, as though a bunch of Valyrian blades is like no big deal. Maybe Valyrian daggers are more common than the swords are, but you'd think that if so, someone like Tywin could just buy a bunch of Valyrian daggers and reforge them into the sword Tywin desperately wanted for so long. So the true value and rarity of Valyrian steel is not very clear. But regardless, this is every Valyrian blade mentioned in all of Game of Thrones. Longclaw and Heartsbane, Ice, Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail, Blackfire, Darksister, Lady Forlorn, Brightroar, Red Rain and Nightfall, the Swords of the Dance, Littlefinger's Dagger, and this other miscellaneous stuff too. There are more swords out there, of course, about 180 more apparently, and Westeros might need them all to win the war against the Walkers. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about the histories and backstories of Thrones, you might like to read The World of Ice and Fire, George Martin's world book, which is all about this sort of stuff. There's a link to buy it below, which supports this channel at no extra cost to you. Some of this art is from The World of Ice and Fire, while other pieces are by Amok.
In the heat of battle, a single moment may fill an eternity. And in the blink of an eye, an eternity passes, and the battle is won or lost.
We know not why we fight.
We know only that we must. We are the damned. We are Legion!
In the Legion League, you'll discover timeless monoliths. When activated, they reveal a frozen battle between two armies from Rayclast's past. Break open the monsters and chests with the most valuable rewards before the time runs out. Be careful which monsters you free, as the most rewarding are also the most dangerous. Journey to the domain of timeless conflict, where the eternal battle between the legions and their generals rages.
Path of Exile Legion also contains an extensive rework of melee combat. We've made all movement skills start instantly, added animation cancelling, made all skills draw their ranges correctly, changed all melee skills to be able to hit multiple adjacent enemies, and fixed up damage timing, ranges, and shapes across all attacks. Instant speed movement and defensive skills now let you respond to incoming attacks effectively. We've also overhauled the animation system to support chaining attacks together and better attack signaling. And we've also improved targeting, attack queuing, and hit feedback. In addition, we've extensively rebalanced all melee skills, melee ascendancy classes, added more defensive options for melee, removed the cap on chance to hit, and have made mechanical changes to certain skills like Cyclone, which is now a channeled skill. With all the melee combat improvements, we wanted players to be able to respond to monster attacks more easily. So we decided to rebalance many older monster skills, improving their signaling and giving the player the ability to dodge their attacks. You can check out Path of Exile Legion on June the 7th.
Yeehaw! Mount up.
Going mobile.
Going mobile. ready to roll.
Roll out.
Čaļo. Pikošky. Neke pikošky. Pik, 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 pikošky. Pik, 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 pikošky. 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 Pik, pik, pik. Čmelo funjalo jak pučo. Jak pučo funjalo. Jak mastodont. Mastodont podradného špízu. Pik, 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 pikošky. Just place it. Что же здесь? São força e tipo. Tem muita pressão forte. Eu gosto do final. Final parece difícil. Dusty. I'll check up the Isso, outras que pronto aí dela. Não tinha defined Artful Wreckage. Artful Wreckage. Fuck. Fuck Artful Wreckage. Change area. Fuck Artful Wreckage. Pick, 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 pikošky, pick, 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 pikošky, pick, 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 pikošky. Áďo, čo je nejaké píkočky? Áďo, čo je? Kam sa zdekoval, ty gurmán? Áďo. Kam sa zdekoval? Gurmán, Áďo. Kam sa zdekoval, gurmán, Áďo? Gurmán, Áďo. Kam som vlastne stekoval Gurmana? A teraz... Vidíš, mucha treba. Pikošky. Pikošky. Je ten Gurmán, rádio. Je ten Gurmán, rádio. Je Gurmán, rádio. Tá naša pikoška. Tá naša gulátka. Tá gulátka, jo. Je náš rádio. Je tá pikoška. Je tá gulátka. Ten šmakofil. Je gulátka, rádio. Tá pikoška. Ten šmakofil. Ten bulvár, rádio. Jehová rádio, naša pikoška. Ten náš makofil, náš Jehová rádio. Kde je ten šmak? Kde je ten rádio? Naša pikoška. Naša húvátka, húvát rádio. Kde je ten rádio? Nehúvát rádio. Naša pikoška. Ten mi grifič. Kde je ten rádio? Nehúvát rádio. Tá naša pikoška. Ten mi grifič. Je náš Jehová rádio, kde sa zažíval, blúzka tabaky, náš rádio. Je ten rádio, naša húvátka, ten náš migrifič, húvát rádio. Jehová rádio, a naša pikoška, a naša Gurmánka, Jehová rádio. Jehová rádio, a naša pikoška. Ten náš migrifič, húvát rádio. Kde je ten rádio? Tá naša húvátka, tá naša loptoška, ten húvát rádio. Kde je ten rádio? Ten náš migrifič, ten náš šalamún, náš rádio. Kde je ten rádio? Tá naša húvátka, ten náš preborník, ten rádio. Kde je ten rádio? Naša húvátka, naša makovka, náš rádio. Kde je ten rádio? Naša húvátka, náš preborník, ten rádio. Kde je ten rádio? Ten náš bublifuk. Rádio boj, je to rádio, tá naša gurmánka, ten náš makaron, ten Aďo. Aďo naša loptoška. Aďo naša gurmánka, ten Aďo. Kde je ten Aďo? Tá naša gurmánka, ten náš mikrifič, ten Aďo. Nikdy som si nevšimol, že on je ako toho mikrifiča. Je to ten Aďo, tá naša gurmánka, ten šmak tabaku. Je to ten Aďo, loptoš Aďo, ten náš maker, ten náš valibuk, ten Aďo, ten šmíz. Je to ten Aďo, ten veľký mikrifič, ten lúskač tabaku, ten Aďo, je to ten Aďo, ten veľký valibuk, to ten Aďo, tá gurmánka, je to ten Aďo, ten žmýkal Aďo, tá naša gurmánka, ten náš valibuk, ten náš valibuk. Spievaj s Aďom. S tou našou gurmánkou, s tým Aďom, makarónom. No nič, bálime fach. Stačilo. Nezohnali sme znova dneska nič, sme spokojní, môžeme to vypnúť ako šmatci.